Hey, good day. Welcome to the Smart Workplace webinar. I'm Fred Woods, Industry Specialist at ESRI. I'll be presenting today along with Mr. Patrick Wallace, Practice Lead for the Facilities and Indoor, and Mr. Stu Rich, Principal and Chief Technology Officer of Penn Bay Solutions. Today you will learn about making your workplace smarter. For the webinar, you are on mute. However, you'll see a question window. Please type questions there and we'll review them at the end of the presentation. At the closing of the webinar, there will be a survey. Please complete the questions so we may produce quality webinars. The webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the page you registered. Thanks for attending. The smart installation improves operational readiness by connecting all departments, providing shared understanding of all the assets and activities on a facility, installation, or campus. A smart workplace optimizes the workplace facilities and space allocation while reducing operational and capital costs. This enables real property and facility management leaders to provide, evaluate, and share information to support the facility, installation, or campus mission. Facilities are mission critical to every organization. A smart installation is not created overnight. However, incremental improvements such as implementing cost-effective solutions that improve facilities performance save time and money, while creating a smarter gut environment for your workplace are possible. This includes space and move management. I'm now turning the presentation over to Pat to discuss Smart Workplace.
Thanks, Fred. I'm Pat Wallace. I lead the facilities and indoor practice at ESRI. So look, there are a lot of stakeholders keeping your workplace functioning, such as facility managers and administrators. They use business systems, tools, and information that they need to be successful. But the side effect is a complex web of stovepipe systems and data. Look, we have to face it. These people cannot effectively manage what they can't measure. And it's even more difficult to measure what they can't see. So for facilities, installations, and campuses, successful managers, commanders, and administrators need immediate access to information about all aspects of their portfolio and at all scales. Next slide. Now, compounding this problem is a key bit of information here that half of organizations really have no true system of record for their real property. The facility space in general is unsophisticated, and technology tools may be missing, outdated, fragmented, and overbuilt, or some combination of those factors. So look, up to 50%, it's really just pen and paper or the information in one person's head. And when that person leaves the organization, there's a lot of learning that has to be undertaken by those that are left in their wake. So creating a smart workplace requires more than a spreadsheet and AutoCAD or the knowledge of that one person. Next slide. Now, this is changing for a couple of key factors here. One is that more and more buildings are becoming data that's actually accessible and retrievable. And number two, occupants, facility occupants and their smart devices are more and more becoming sensors that can transact against that facility's data and keep it up to date. Now, with this development, there are two important considerations when regarding ESRI technology. Next slide. Number one, unlike a traditional FM or space management system, ArcGIS Platform is basically designed to consume and integrate a variety of different data sources and business systems. It provides a framework to integrate, visualize, analyze, and share indoor information that can be viewed in dashboards, on maps, and used as input for other business systems. So think of ESRI's location platform as a system of systems for the workplace or installation, connecting to your existing systems of record, insight, and engagement. And secondly, next slide, Fred. This means that today it's no longer just about FM or space management. Thanks to this available data, it's also about maintaining a smart workplace and installation. So here we are as a location platform, tying those traditional FM, space management, and other systems of record together, helping managers gain valuable insights into their workplaces and installations to see the whole picture. Remember, all different aspects of facility information share location in common. That factor is really the only element that can be used to link these different disparate pieces of data together. So ESRI's ArcGIS is the ideal platform to do so, scaling from the room, individual pieces in that room to the entire globe. Next slide. Following that, ESRI has a broad vision for how to deliver this value to customers that's grouped into two scales, that of the portfolio and that of the workplace, which supports decision-making on a global scale, all the way down to, how can you more effectively use individual spaces within a facility at a particular place on the globe. And you can start with, differing levels of data, points on a map on the left, all the way down to detailed floor plan information sourced from BIM or CAD on the right. So next slide, and we can, roll into our demos. So Fred, I'll hand it back to you to kind of tee up the demo part of this.
So next you'll see ESRI technology used for space management. Stu's going to be bringing us into Envision to set up the problem. Pat's going to work on some ops and dashboard in 3D, and then Stu's going to fix the problem, and Pat's going to talk to us about data integration. So I'm going to pass this over to Stu now.
Thanks, Fred. So we'll start by looking at a campus here, and at this scale, you're comfortable with and familiar with using GIS to manage your property. You understand that a facilities manager is responsible for transportation and parking and a whole range of facilities, infrastructure and utilities that support these, the workers and the operations of your facilities. But what you might not have thought of so much up until this point is using GIS to manage the insides of your buildings and the operations that are going on there as well. So we're going to take a look inside your buildings a little bit. At the campus scale, we can look at buildings by some of your key performance metrics. We can look at buildings by type, for instance, or we can look at buildings by vacancy rates. We can look at buildings by condition. But let's go inside the building and see if we can understand a little bit more about what's going on here. So with the facilities GIS, you're really interested in understanding how the building contributes to your overall performance metric. So when I identify on this building, you'll get some basic information about the building, but you'll also get a number of performance metrics here about capacity, current occupancy, vacancy rates, gross area, net area. All that is being rolled up from data within the building. So if we come down and open up one of the floors here, the same data is summarized at the floor level, but we can actually drill down into the floor plan, and we can look at spaces by type, where are my offices, where are my conference rooms. We can look at spaces by the organization assigned, perhaps, or maybe by availability. So this is indicating where we have spaces that are fully assigned, or where we might have spaces to put people that are open at the moment. So if I click on one of these spaces here, you'll see that we have an employee assigned here. Albert Einstein's assigned to this space. They have a lot of smart people out there in Redlands. And so we can assign people, we can move people here. We can also edit our attributes if we wish through the web application if we have the right permissions. So we can maintain a lot of information about the insides of our buildings. This basic data came from CAD in this case, and we have data interoperability tools to keep your CAD floor plans and the GIS in sync. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Pat will show you some different alternatives for data management. We can also look at assets inside the building. So for example, if we want to locate, in this case I think we've got some printers or other kinds of, that's a scanner there. So we can locate individual assets within the floor plate. We can group those assets up, and we can link those back to a work order management system in a later phase if we so desire. So I hope you've been able to see here just a quick look at the fact that we can drill inside the building, roll up information about how people are related to spaces, how assets are related to spaces. And now Pat's going to show you a little bit about how that plays out at the portfolio scale, how we would look at these kinds of patterns and practices across the whole portfolio. And when we come back, we're going to move some people around in bulk here. Over to you, Pat.
Yeah, thanks, Stu. I appreciate it. So here we should be looking at what we call our operations dashboard technology. This is a what we would call a off-the-shelf tool that ESRI provides. And in this instance, we're simply pouring in the same underlying data that Stu is just demonstrating for the ESRI campus in Redlands. And so here we can see a number of buildings, almost a couple dozen buildings here. And the dashboard technology allows us to chew on and aggregate, summarizing the underlying spatial information and the connected attributes to that spatial data. So, moving out of the, jargon speak, we have buildings and we have floors and spaces and site outlines, and each of those layers have characteristics that are important to facility and space managers for this particular campus. So in this instance, we have a dashboard that's solving a challenging use case, space management, and we're able to automatically summarize the total number of offices on this campus, as well as the total number of vacancies and occupied spaces. We can see that here, nearly 3,000 total occupiable spaces, and 600 of which are vacant. Each of these widgets are configurable. So here we just configured one where we said, add up all the number of spaces and what their total square footage is, and then let's also show the total gross square footage so that we can understand net to gross characteristics, which, as you know, are a measure of building efficiency, as well as when you use that same number, the net, and compare it to the head count, you get a metric called density, right? So we can understand how many people have been put into that into the occupiable space, and is that an efficient use of that space? So here it's at 500, and if you're used to managing an administrative campus, you're thinking to yourself, good grief, Pat, that's like 4 times what it should be. But this is really an R&D campus, so it makes more sense. There's a lot of lab space and auditoriums, and so it's a bit different than a traditional, office complex. Here, though, the vacancy thing is not different than traditional. Normally, we'd want to be at about 15%, but in this case, we're at 33, so almost double where we want to be at. Overall, the net to gross looks pretty good. We're a little bit over where we'd like to be, but that's not so bad. All right, so what happened to the data? Nothing. It's there. I need only to select it. So if I select a building, I can see the same type of characteristics for one building that I had for the campus, and then I can begin to compare one building to the next and the next, or I could multi-select and choose my select tool and say, well, how many square footage do I have here in the center of the campus? And maybe my strategy here is to begin to think of a move plan, for a new business unit that's coming on site. So let's say a new unit is being moved to this particular campus. Where in the heck can I put them? Well, I can see here that the hotter the color, the more vacancies there are. So, building M here may be a good candidate. So I could click on it and I could see, well, the net to gross seems kind of off here. There are a number of work orders. There's probably, oh, look at this, 170 vacancies. So that's interesting. So I could potentially put 170 persons in this building. I could look at the breakout of office types, and that'll give me a good idea of, is this just going to be a box move for the new folks that'll be on site, or is this one where it would require construction, like building new walls, reconfiguring the floor plate, etc. And do we have the right type of amenities to support those persons? And then I could look here, well, that's interesting. Building O is like a quarter the size of M, but the vacancies are far and above what M has. So that's curious. So maybe O is a good candidate for reconfiguring. So let's kind of dive into this a little bit. We can see that, yeah, I mean, the vacancy here is at like 40%, so that is not ideal. The efficiency of the layout looks pretty good. It's just really the number of vacancies. Here's one that we can kind of make fun of ourselves, is that maybe it's because we're older than the typical cohort. You can see here the number of vacancies increases as you go up in the number of floors. So with that, I did want to flip it over to one other view, so I could dive into that, right? I could go, well, where are these vacancies? Is this a good candidate, for reconfiguration? So maybe building O is the one. So I could jump to another technology here that allows me to go underneath the building envelope. This is our 3D campus viewer, and here we're just exposing the vacancies. It's linking to a related table and automatically understanding where employees are and making the vacant offices pop as red. And we can see here, this looks pretty bad, right? There's a lot of holes in this floor plan here that need to be filled. I mean, each of these wings, 30 people in each wing. If I count the wings here, I could probably put about 120 people on each floor, and we already know that there's 105 vacancies in this building. So I could probably free up one entire floor for a whole new team. So with that, I'm going to hand it back off to Stu, and maybe we can figure out the challenge of, how do we declutter and reorganize and create more efficiencies in this particular building. So with that, I'm going to hand it back off to Stu.
Thanks, Pat. So as Pat has suggested here, we have an interesting challenge where we've got a new organization moving on to campus, and and we need to find homes for almost 300 people in this case. So I want to look at my inventory, my space inventory as a space planner, and I'm looking for buildings that have a significant capacity. So I'm going to filter my buildings, and I'm going to look for buildings with a capacity of 300 or so. And I can quickly see that I really only have two alternatives. We have the M building that Patrick was looking at. We know there's a bunch of construction going on in there, so that's really not a great candidate. So let's look a little bit closer at this O building. So as I look at the O building, I can see I've got 3 floors available. Looks like the first floor, if I look at the first floor, that one has reasonable population in there. If I turn on by availability, you'll see most of the floor is reasonably well populated. There's a few down in this lower corner. But if I then go to the second and third floor, it looks like those are pretty open. So we'll look at the third floor in particular, and I can see that from a space type point of view, this is mostly office space. It really fits the needs of my folks that I'm moving in there. If I look at this from the point of view of availability, looks like there's almost nobody there at the moment, so I have sort of free hand to put the people where I want them. So now I'm going to go create a move plan. And I have created a move plan in here. I've imported my 285 employees from my HR system that are going to participate in this move. I have selected the spaces that we were just looking at to participate in this move. And then I have gone through and I have assigned employees to spaces. So for each employee, I can see, let's look at Mr. Faraday here. I have assigned him a new space. Mr. Freud, I've got a new space for him. And I'm really just dragging these spaces from the space view over to the employee view. So I just drag this guy over here if I wanted to put him there. So once I've got all of my employee assignments done, then I have the opportunity to run a set of business rule checks. So I'm going to run the validation rules here, and it's going to be looking to see whether or not all the spaces in my design, whether I have assigned people to spaces that are unassignable, whether I have more than one space assignment for an individual. This is okay, and in the sample data I've got way more spaces than I have people to assign, so this is pretty common. So once I have the assignments the way I want it, then I click the commit button, and the commit button will then move all of these people from their past places, if they had one, or assign them to their new spaces, and it will update the base data, and it will recalculate all of the roll-up data at the floor and the building and the site level, so that we have an understanding of how this has changed our overall performance characteristics. So if I now come back and refresh my my planner app, what I find is that you'll see we're now looking at that third floor, and I've assigned almost all the spaces there. And if I go to the floor level, you'll see my vacancy rates have dropped significantly for floor 3, and therefore my space KPIs have really increased significantly for the overall campus, but particularly for that building. So that kind of wraps it up for Demo World today. Patrick has some demos to talk to you about. So how does the data management, the data maintenance story work for this behind the scenes?
Thanks, Stu. So with that, let's take a whirl in some of our desktop technology, and we'll start with the end product before it's published to the web tier and presented in some of the applications that Stu and I were previously showing. So here we can see the result of pushing your CAD and BIM data into a consolidated data repository that can be used across your organization. The interesting thing here is that we understand how you need to see data. So quickly I'm going to turn on all the information for the campus to prove just that. So we have a way to bake all your CAD and BIM data and set it up as a routine process to bulk update this consolidated data repository from your record drawings. And we understand the requirements of visualizing and analyzing indoor information, meaning that I can't just leave it as a jumbled mess like this. Do you see that? I want to view one floor at a time. And so we have a couple ways to handle that, in the desktop technology. One is we can expose the hierarchy of the data. So let's say I wanted to view, as part of this move plan that Stu was talking about, floor 2 of M, where I had noted previously there were a number of vacancies, and floor 3 of O, right? I can isolate, only those buildings out of the entirety of your original data set. So here I can, see, we're not showing anything else except for floor 3 and O and floor 2 and M, and I could start plugging away here in terms of, understanding the underlying data, selecting individual data components. Let's say like this office, this is actually where I sit in real life. And we can see all the underlying GIS characteristics here that could be updated to keep the system of record up to date and trusted. So how do we get data into that system? Well, Stu didn't go into a demonstration of Envision Foundation, but there they, you have, let's say you have a number of CAD record data in a repository, and Foundation links that repository to some extract, translation, and loading tools that are run regularly. It monitors the system for changes in the CAD, and it looks at changes in geometry. And if it notices that there are updates in the attributes or the geometry, like spaces, buildings, floors, it'll suck that data into the your new indoor system of record. Another tool that we use once it's in GIS is something that we call, it's called ARIES Map. It's developed by a partner of ours. And here, what we can see is that I've authenticated with ArcGIS Universe, right? So I can see all my groups, and I can add data to the map, and I've already done that. And I can see here the similar hierarchy that I saw in ArcGIS Pro, that desktop tool I was showing previously. And you know what? It is the same hierarchy. This file here is the same one that I was able to save with our level add-in, which is part of our indoors suite of products. And I can map the hierarchy, I can save it out, and I can share it with other applications like this. So right now I'm only viewing building O, floor 1. Maybe I want to change that to O, floor 3, and M, floor 2, like I was showing earlier. I just only need to click apply, and it's going to suck in that underlying data coming from a real feature service, which would be the same feature data and web services that Stu is showing in those other applications. So just like with regular CAD editing, you're not going to edit every floor plan at one time. That's not realistic. You just want to edit the one floor plans that are meaningful to you and update them. So that's what we allow you to do here. So now you can see I have M and O, and I got a lot of point layers here that I really don't want to see. So let's say I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to turn that off, and I want to show you something pretty cool. We could export this out as regular CAD to hand back to a vendor. Maybe they're working on site doing some repainting, and they need to tally up the total wall area. For the job. So here I'm going to add in labels for the unit name, and that way I can export out some CAD that makes sense. So that's pretty cool. So it's just running on the underlying GIS data, right? So if I select that space, I can see it's the same, literally the same information I was viewing on the desktop technology. But now I'm viewing it in this CAD tool, right? It has the same type of CAD tools that you're familiar with. And that solves a huge challenge. How do you, curate indoor data set like this that's, could be potentially vast and with a, massive amount of data in it. So that's what I wanted to show you, and we look forward, to any follow-up questions. So just to summarize, we've showed, tools to, view data once it's in ArcGIS. We talked about, Penbay's Envision Foundation technology. I didn't show you this, but we also have tools to batch import CAD floor plans to GIS using a simple, Excel spreadsheet to map data over, and this tool will read that data, push it into a database, and then you can create this consolidated data set like you see here. And once you publish it to the web tier, there are tools to keep it up to date without having to go back to the original CAD. You could touch it like this, or you can maintain the original system that you had and use a tool like Envision Foundation to update it nightly or hourly or however often the data changes. So,
all right. Hey, First, thank you, Stu and Pat, for those great live demos. That was amazing watching how you're going from 2D to 3D and moving things around really quickly. But just to summarize what you saw, Stu demonstrated Envision. He took us from the macro view of the campus and drilled down into individual spaces so we can see patterns to gain a better understanding of that workplace. And then he set up the situation, what needed to be done. Pat further gave us some better views, and this might be a different view for managers versus staff and such, but this is where he's able to quickly visualize the data from Envision, and we saw how he used different widgets within a dashboard to help us understand the aspects of the building. The widgets showed stats of buildings, how they use visual cues as opposed to a spreadsheet, where you saw the dashboard there and the percentages and everything. So a little bit different view. And then he also quickly compared the stats between the buildings and the floors. That was quite powerful to just see it as opposed to drill down through a spreadsheet. And then Pat took us into our 3D campus viewer using the same data that was used that powered the dashboard. And again, it's just a different view to give you a different perspective of what we're looking at. Then Stu, using Envision, he demonstrated how to quickly create a move plan. This is, when you're trying to save time and money for the facility and make it easier for the facility manager to just take care of the situation. Let's get it done. Let's get it and not spend a lot of man hours on that. And then to summarize, to bring everything up, Pat showed us how to easily integrate indoor information into the ESRI location platform. Then use business systems to edit and refine the data, such as the Graybert CAD software Aries map. But this is great, but how can you as a facility manager, installation commander, or campus administrator implement a solution quickly? Well, you work with ESRI partners such as Penn Bay. ESRI partners round out our approach to delivering smart installations offerings. Our partners such as Penn Bay Solutions, they develop enhanced capabilities that can be integrated into business systems or systems of record or linked to citizen engagement tools. These solutions can help answer difficult data management challenges related to facilities management while delivering a solid set of applications to get you started making your installation smarter. I'll be turning over the presentation to Stu Rich. Stu will present successful patterns Penn Bay developed, demonstrating their expertise with facility management. Stu?
Thanks, Fred. As you described, Penn Bay focuses on the business's challenges of facilities owners and operators. We build and support a set of COTS applications that sit on top of the ArcGIS platform and deliver solutions for portfolio planning, facilities maintenance and operations, and safety and security. We have customers in many different industries and levels of government and in many parts of the world. We've been a partner of ESRI's for a very long time, and we're now working with ESRI to create a set of initial operating capabilities to get customers started quickly with facilities GIS. Next slide, please. So the idea of an initial operating capability is that we can quickly install and configure the core capabilities that you need to start realizing value from your facilities GIS investment. The IOC contains the necessary information model, data interoperability tools, ready-to-use apps, and packaged implementation services to get you up and running quickly for a modest price point. We have implemented a number of these for a range of different customers, and customers find the pattern to be very successful. We've done this for some DOE labs, for higher ed, for local government. It's a pattern that really works quite nicely. Next slide, please. We have a number of different IOC offerings to choose from, depending on what your most pressing business need might be. Whether your need is at the portfolio level, related to maintenance and operations, or safety and security, we can get you up and running quickly. The packages have a high degree of interdependence, which is to say that once you lay down the foundation for one, you're reusing that architecture for any of the others. Once you get started with one, it's quite easy to add the capabilities from other packages or to extend and integrate with other system of records. The folks that are going to find this most interesting within your organizations are folks like the director of facilities or space managers and planners, operations and maintenance managers, asset and work managers, etc. Next slide, please. To implement these IOC offerings, we have packages of professional services from ESRI to install and configure the basic ArcGIS platform infrastructure, and from Penbay to load the appropriate information model, install and configure the data interoperability capabilities, and then install and configure Envision Foundation and the apps that come with that particular package. When we are done, you'll be able to start using the apps immediately to address your facilities challenges. These packages are designed to be completed in about 12 weeks, so very quick flash to bang, very quick time to realize value from your initial investment. Next slide, please. Once your IOC is up and running, then you have the ability to extend and expand the capabilities that are delivered in the IOC. This may mean customizing dashboards and reports, or adding new ones, adding new layers to your implementation, expanding into other business areas, etc. We often find that once the IOC is in place, customers want to integrate with other facility systems and combine that information with the map-based interface. These integrations may include your asset and work management system, HR systems, scheduling systems, building management systems, energy monitoring, automated access control, CCTV. It's kind of amazing, really, once you get the interactive map out in front of your users, they all have data that they want to put on the map, and it quickly becomes a negotiation about whose data gets in there first. The idea is that once the foundation is laid, there's a lot more you can do to extend and focus the value of your facilities GIS over time. So these IOCs, we hope, will be a really valuable way for you all to get started with facilities GIS in your organization. Over to you, Fred.
Hey, thanks, Stu. I just want to reiterate what he was talking about there is that, partner offerings can help you jumpstart your installation to be smarter. Penbay offers the facilities GIS software facility management to create order out of your complex facility data, making your information more intelligible and valuable. Planning and management capabilities enables you to aggregate and visualize data to give you a truly holistic perspective of your facility. For space and move management, to focus on allocating and optimizing existing space utilization and managing moves, adds, and changes. So this is the second webinar in the series. In webinars 2 through 6, we dive deep into topics to help you quickly jumpstart your installation to be smarter. I encourage you to sign up for the upcoming webinars at go.esri.com/SI-webinars. You can sign up for the series or just for the topics you're interested in. And finally, visit the ESRI Smart Installations page to download the industry's perspective, creating smart installations with the power of GIS. And then for immediate action, complete the Contact Us form at the bottom of the page, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Also, if you're going to be at the ESRI UC the 10 through 13 of July 2017 at the San Diego Convention Center, please visit Pat at either the Facilities or 3D Islands, or Stu at the Penbay booth 1820 in the exhibit hall, or visit the Defense and Intel neighborhood and ask for Smart Installations help. And now we're open for questions. Please type in your questions in the window, in the question window below on your dashboard for the webinar. Now I have a few questions here. So let's see here. The first one, can I continue to maintain my floor plans in CAD and still get the benefits of facilities GIS? Stu or Pat?
I mean,
yes, you're sure. Go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, we have a lot to say on that. Yeah, definitely. Stu started to say you certainly can. A quick overview, and then I'll throw it off to Stu to go into detail about how PenBay does it. In our typical implementations, what we'll do is, we'll work with you to figure out where you store your CAD. We'll work with you to, brief you on what best practices are for your CAD. For example, if you're listening and you're from DoD, you typically would follow the Tri-Service Standard for CAD, which aligns to how AIA standards are. So it's pretty explicit, and the layer structure is a known quantity. But we know that, for older floor plans and even data that you get back for, design build initiatives, often the project documentation is lacking. So there may need to be some updates, but then we have a set of tools that we can point at the layers in not just one CAD, but all your CAD to import it into a GIS database, and not just wipe out the original, but just to update the features that need to be updated, and send messages to your QA, QC team to review those changes and accept them into your master data repository. And typically we'd use tools like, think like Windows Task Scheduler, for example, to listen to your system, the folder where your CAD's stored, to understand, when the file has been modified, and then, analyze that and compare it to the existing data in your GIS. And, basically you just let it run. And then, the folks that need to QA it get a message to QA it. And, any apps connected to that are updated. Underlying visualization is updated, and Stu's company has taken that to the next step with Envision Foundation, and I'll let him talk about what they do with that technology. Stu?
Yeah, thanks, Pat. So as Pat describes, there is, and we have developed some pretty mature tooling to automate the harvest from CAD and BIM sources. It's not just a CAD story for sure these days. You have to be able to support both CAD for your older buildings and BIM for the new buildings that are coming online. So we recognize that for some organizations, they want to continue to have CAD or BIM as the system of record for their in-building data, but they want to harvest that data into GIS for some of the workflows like we saw today. So we've developed these automated tools that monitor the file system where you're storing your CAD or BIM. When there are updates, we harvest that data into the GIS and do a bunch of data validation along the way. So there should never be a time when your CAD or BIM and your GIS are out of sync more than a few minutes.
I have a couple of other questions here, or several others. It says here, what CAFM or CAFM or IWMS databases have ESRI and or PenBay interfaced in the back end with the geodatabase?
You want to take the lead on that first, or you want me to, Pat?
You can go ahead and start, Stu, and then I'll follow up this time.
All right. So we have, there's a couple of basic patterns that happen. There are some customers that want to use the GIS as the system of record for all their space and move kinds of information. Other customers want to use the GIS to visualize information that might be being maintained in another CAFM or IWMS. So over the years, we have integrated with a wide variety of other CAFM IWMS systems, including ArcGIS, Tririga, Insight, AssetWorks, FM Systems, Infor, EAM. So that it's a pretty wide range of systems that present this opportunity. Our own approach is not to be a rip and replace kind of organization, but rather to embrace and enhance systems that may be already in place and providing value to your organization.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, for the CAFM, CMMS type system, similar to what Stu had outlined, maybe I'll just talk about the approaches. One is from, the database. That's more of a, I think, Stu, you've described that as kind of the Howitzer approach. I mean, it's like, at the foundation of the totality of the underlying system. And, maybe that's the easiest thing to do. It depends on the client. Sometimes they have ready access to a whole bevy of database analysts and have permissions, in a data warehouse to, create the views that are necessary to link to a system like GIS. And sometimes, that system has a ready tool just to create the necessary views. So, for example, IBM's suite of, their platform for, asset management, Maximo, as well as a platform for, workplace services, Tririga. Both of them have an integration framework where you can, take a particular view, a report, and push it out as like an outbound view in another database. So, quick example. So let's say your underlying Tririga or Maximo instance is Oracle. You could actually pick a business object and go to the integration console and either of those applications and push out a view to a SQL database if you wanted to, and that view would be maintained live constantly. And you could configure what fields are visible and which ones are actually updatable in terms of bidirectional. And that's typically what you want. You want the ability to update your underlying system of records. So in that instance, GIS is a window into those existing systems of record you put in place. On the other end of the spectrum, there are ways to link to services pushed out from those types of applications that you can access directly from what we'd say the application side, not the data side that I just described. So for example, you could have a web service of space vacancy information that you could link to in one of the apps that I showed you or Stu showed you, and when you click on a space, it would just show up as an additional series of pop-up attributes, for example. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Stu and Pat. Next question we have says here, for CAD that does not comply with standards, is it best to bring the CAD to standard or to do that work in the GIS? That's a good question.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll start real quick. I'll be quick about this. I think it's better to bring the, if you're going to continue to curate the data in CAD, it's better to fix your CAD. And you can do that project by project, or you could do it, broad brush, right? When I worked for the Coast Guard, we did a broad brush. We handled it during our FCA facility condition assessment and through our space utilization assessment process, where we just had the vendor who was doing the reporting for us update the floor plan and CAD information and bring it up to the tri-service specification, which we adhered to. If you're going to curate and manage that data set in GIS, it's less important to do something like that because there are tools to push out generic or typical DWGs from the ESRI GIS platform, as well as from Pinbay's Envision suite of products. So you could generate the CAD you need for project work from the GIS, but do the necessary updating of geometries and attributes through GIS directly, as well as with tools like Envision and things like Graybert's Aries map, their CAD product. So you have different paths you can go. You need to choose the path that best fits your organization and your staff.
I think you answered two questions there, because the next one was, what program do I need to use Aries? And that's Graybert, and I believe that's G-R-A-E-B-E-R-T.
Correct. Yeah, they're a partner based out of Berlin, so got the German pronunciation there. Yeah, so it's called Aries Map. You can actually find it on our marketplace. So just look up ESRI Marketplace and look for Aries Map, and you'll get more information. The version of the product I was showing you is the one that will be released by UC. So.
Okay, I have some more questions here as well. It says here, what types of systems do you typically see integrated with facilities GIS?
Stu, you want to take that?
Sure, there's a long list. I would say that the tops of the list are typically CAFM and IWMS systems, like have been mentioned in the first question there. Second would be asset and work systems like IBM Maximo or AssetWorks or Cartograph or systems like that. But then there's also a number of kinds of systems that are kind of continuously reporting, like energy management and consumption, building automation, automated access control, that sort of thing, sort of SCADA kinds of systems. There are often the desire to integrate with scheduling systems. If you're an organization, an education organization that's using eSchool Plus or 25 Live or something like that, that's often a good integration opportunity. I think at this point we've integrated with 27 different systems over the years, so it's a pretty long list.
Great answer. Next question is there a way to restrict who can see and edit which subsets of data?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start and, Stu, why don't you start and then I can talk? Okay. I'll start with the typical ArcGIS components, and then Stu can elaborate on what they do in Vision. So there are three fundamental ways, starting with core ArcGIS technology. One is, connecting to that enterprise database. So, the kind of server-based database system like Oracle, SQL. So you can set permissions there in terms of the users that can access that data, named users in your system, authenticate user password or authenticate through Windows logon. So if they're in your network and they have a Windows logon and you specify them to a particular group or as an individual, they could get access to, individual layers in that database or entire databases. And then, through ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro, our desktop technology, you can even, specify which fields are updatable or even viewable. And then once you share that information to the web tier, permissions are further enhanced through group settings. So it's a named user system, and so only named users have access to the portal. And you can set groups where certain named users are added to that group, and content is shared, to specific groups. So that's the standard ArcGIS ways you would handle that. And then Stu, on top of that, what do you do with Envision?
Well, data sensitivity for facilities is often a big issue. You'll often hear folks that will tell you that you couldn't possibly share my floor plans because there's so much information on the floor plans that is sensitive. And that position isn't necessarily wrong if you think of a floor plan as an AutoCAD file that has all that stuff pulled into the same document. But when you start teasing that apart in a GIS where you can separate out the different layers of information and secure them separately like Pat was just describing, then you have the ability to really publish out your floor plans to some populations that are containing really very little or no sensitive information, and to other groups that have more complex and maybe more sensitive information. So understanding your security model is a really important thing, and understanding how to leverage the ArcGIS platform to implement that is important and powerful. Beyond that, there are sometimes the needs to restrict access or certain operations to subsets of buildings or spaces. I may have a space administrator that can only edit certain buildings or spaces that are assigned to certain departments. And those are capabilities that we also enable within Envision so that you can assign a space admin to a particular department and only allow them to edit and update the spaces that belong to that department. So data sensitivity permissions are an interesting challenge to work through, but the good news is that there are really good capabilities to make sure that all of your facilities information is properly and completely secured.
Great. Thank you very much, Stu. I have one last question here, and we have to end it after this. This question is, do you support SDS FIE for military installations?
Of course. I want to start real quick about like different concepts for applications and the content. So SDS FIE, and I'm familiar, and I mean I don't know how it's interpreted through different agencies, but it's a data standard. And then I'll just kind of elaborate real quick on typically how we would make this work in an implementation anywhere in the world for, let's say, generic customer X. Generally, there's a production database, right, with the authoritative content. And I'd say if I was crosswalking typical deployment, that's where we would have everything SDS FIE compliant. But then views of that data would be created that would be necessary to support various applications, because different applications really are ways of seeing the world through the eyes of a business user. It needs to retrieve data from that underlying production database a certain way. So typically what we do is we'd set up like a presentation database or a publication database that creates like these snapshotted views of your production data in your production database to support the peculiarities and necessities of individual apps. So these publication databases look different than the production database, where I would imagine your SDS FIE, system of record content would be stored. But maybe, I mean, it's done different in different agencies, but that gives you an idea of, there's no issue having your data in SDS FIE format, but then creating, tailored views of that underlying data to support different apps. Stu?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to that, Pat. I think SDS FIE is a many splendored thing, and it's got different variations depending on the agency you talk to, as you described. So there may be different approaches necessary depending on what you want to do, but certainly no reason why you shouldn't be able to use that data, right? Particularly in the landscape scale.
Yeah, I mean, in SDS FIE, I know it's gotten a little more granular through the years, going into the building. So I understand that some of that's, it's not fully fleshed out at certain levels of detail, and I'm sure it will through the preceding years. But as Stu said, different agencies, have different implementations. So, if there's additional follow-on questions, we'd be able to add more detail to it.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, I want to say thank you very much, Pat and Stu, for making this presentation and webinar a success. And I want to thank everybody who attended the webinar. Now, this brings us to the end of the Smart Installations, Smart Workplace webinar. We thank you for attending, and we hope that you are able to attend other webinars in the future. Please visit our Smart Installations page, go.esri.com/smartinstallations. Thank you and have a wonderful day.